Thank you once again for joining us on the More People podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Fitzmaurice, CEO at More People, joined today by Chris Francis, Retail and Wholesale Director from Hilliers. A bit about Hilliers, first of all, because Hilliers may be a familiar name to some people, but not to everybody. This is a garden centre and nursery group. Is that the best way to sum it up?
So Hillier is a group of several horticultural businesses, been going for 160 years now. Formed in 1864, was originally a horticultural sort of plant business, selling plants by mail order, but is now in its modern day a business made up of three divisions. One is the amenity division, with the largest grower of trees, semi-mature trees in Europe. We supply to a lot of the sort of large contracts. So we've done things like the Olympic Park, the Scottish Parliament building, those sort of larger contracts we supply trees for. And then we have a wholesale nursery. Until recently supplied a lot of our garden centre competitors with plants, but we took the decision to supply only our own garden centres. So we grow about 1 million plants a year on the nursery that we put into our own garden centres. And then the other piece, and the biggest piece of the pie, is the garden centre business, which is now 22 garden centres based across the south of England.
Are you a lifer in the sector?
No, I'm not actually. I was a retailer for many years, worked for John Lewis 15 years when I left school, went to the University of Retail, as it was known at the time, worked for Boots for a few years, but then got into garden centres when Country Gardens was a sort of PLC, which obviously then was subsequently taken over by Wyvale, and when they were both the biggest groups in the country, which made Wyvale the biggest business. I moved on from Wyvale to run my own business for a few years when the professional retailers got involved. The new management went in and renamed Wyvale the Garden Centre Group. I was asked to go back and help sort the mess out at the time. And that's probably when I first met Guy and got involved with More People.
So have you become a plantsman against your will?
No, not really. No, not really. What's really fascinating is when I was a youngster, my dad was a nurseryman, and he worked in a tomato growing nursery. And I didn't know this for a long time, because I only ever knew him as a man who worked in the petrochemical industry. He was working in a refinery. But I found out much later on that actually his passion was being a nurseryman, and for the first few years of his life he was a nurseryman, so it must be in the blood somewhere. and certainly he was a keen gardener. When I was a youngster, like a lot of kids, I loved it in the garden and growing things, and really enjoyed that. I then obviously wanted to earn money, went into mainstream retail, all of that sort of stuff, career, and it was it was good almost getting back into garden centres and back to sort of rekindle my knowledge with plants. So I've always been a keen plantsman and been very interested.
For the scale at which it happens now, particularly if you're not familiar with the Hilliers brand, if you live in the Midlands or the North, away from some of those garden centres, may not be on the tip of everyone's tongues, but the scale at which things happen in terms of the number of plants that are grown and the quantity of trees that are grown is mind-bending.
Yeah, it is mind-bending for most people. It's always interesting. People want to come and join our wholesale nursery, and they want to come and grow plants, and they think that they're going to come into this lovely environment where they're going to sort of nurture these few plants in pots, and then we move them into our garden centres. It is so far from that when you see it. It is a factory. They are plant factories, and we grow, as I said earlier, 1 million plants a year. So we have 1 million pots on the ground, and they're all turned within 1 year, and they are all on a production line, and they're turned very quickly and moved into our garden centres. And that makes up about 40% of our plant range in our garden centres. So you're talking 3 or 4 million plants in a garden centre that are turned every year.
And how big are the trees when the trees go out for some of the projects you've mentioned? They're going out in scale, but also as big specimens.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I say we're the largest grower of semi-mature trees, so there are a lot of people who grow the small whips and grow significant volumes, but we take all of our trees, and our youngest tree we grow is one that we've started as a whip and reaches 7 years old, and it has about a 10 centimetre girth, and it's quite a reasonable sized tree. But the majority of the trees we move into these projects are semi-mature or even mature trees. We have the ability to take a fully grown oak, pull it up out of the ground, transport it to wherever one of the big landscaping projects is, and put that in the ground. And I think if anybody's ever visited the Olympic Park, it's always the easiest one to talk about. All of those trees in the Olympic Park were grown by us, and you'll see that some of them are pretty much fully mature trees. So it's quite an interesting challenge putting those on a truck, obviously having them escorted because they are such big trees, such wide root balls, and they're escorted into these projects, and big cranes putting them up, big wires tying them down to hold them. It's quite a scalable project.
Yeah, the machinery that digs them out, they're impressive things, aren't
The machine is absolutely incredible, yeah.
And I've got to mention Chelsea as well, because did I read that you're the world record holder for medals at Chelsea, or continuous medals at Chelsea?
Yeah, so the company holds the world record for having completed 74 continuous gold medals. So that's every year. I'm not responsible for that. I'm not quite that old. But I was responsible for the last 5 years.
So balls it up at your peril.
So at the end, it was every year. Chelsea was quite stressful, particularly in my position, because all I am concerned about is not breaking that run.
Yeah.
And that is really quite a responsibility. And you do worry, because you can't take for granted. Everybody thinks, oh yeah, Hillier, you're going to get the gold medal. You only just have to drop off a few points and that gold medal's gone.
Yeah.
And so it's a pretty nerve-wracking thing.
But the nature of something that's as high quality as Chelsea, therefore, suggests that while you're doing a lot of volume on plants and trees, it's not cheap, stack them high. There's lots of quality stuff in there as well.
Hillier has always been about quality. We've always been a business that understands our customer base, does expect quite a high quality product from us. A lot of the garden centres used to buy from us because we had a very high quality product. We absolutely do not let that drop. And so the quality of the product we grow on the nursery, even though it's going into our centres, still has to be top quality. The centres can still refuse to take that product if it's not at its best. So they are still growing to the same standard. And interestingly, although we don't do Chelsea anymore, we do a couple of the Gardeners World shows, so more regional shows. You cannot drop that habit of a lifetime. We always deliver an exhibit to the standard we would deliver at Chelsea, because it's almost sort of in your blood, and the team, it's in their DNA to do that.
When we're talking about technology and the scale at which things happen within Hilliers, I think people perhaps on this podcast expect the conversation to be about technology and robotics and AI when we're talking about food factories, or we're talking about food propagation, or it becomes the ever challenging, how do you teach a robot to delicately pick a strawberry? That tends to be the thing that is the visual for those sorts of things. In reality, lots of the food production sites is about robotic arms moving things from A to B. What role is technology playing, and how have things evolved in your time at Hilliers on the nursery side?
So I think on the nursery side, actually, it has been relatively slow, the movement of technology. And of course, we want to embrace technology, and we're building, at the moment, we're just completing a new structure, which is sort of one of the latest design structures, the best structure there is for growing. And we are talking about the sort of technology we can use in it. But as you say, there is all this talk of things that will carefully handle plants, and I think that sort of stuff's a long way off. We do have machines now that we can run plants through that will prune them in a really nice sort of ball shape, if that's how you set them.
Things that spin around.
So it's almost like, Edward Scissorhands thing. There's all these scissors pruning away around this plant as it spins around and moves through. So that sort of technology is there. And look, I'm sure over time we will see more technology come into play in that sort of environment. But I think probably for our business, it's the garden centres that are going to see the biggest steps in technology over the coming years. And that's something I am actually really trying to look at the moment for our business, is where can we get technology to help us? We are always going to be a service industry. We need to make sure we have people facing customers, because that's why people visit our businesses. We're a very physical business, and people like talking to people, and that is really important. I think over time, a lot of our people get deflected from that with all the other tasks we ask them to do. And what we're looking at as a business is, how do we take all of that task away from our teams and get the people that we employ back on the shop floor, purely talking to the customer and selling to the customer.
Yeah.
So everything else around it, we want to try and take away. So, we're looking at, we actually do a lot of our stock management centrally now. We have people at the moment in a team ordering centrally, but we are looking at some of this new AI technology, which will actually predict what we need on the shelves at the right time and do that ordering for us. So, that's probably not far away. We're also in the centres looking at this new RFID technology, which I think in a few years' time will ultimately replace the barcode. I'm sure a lot of us can remember when the barcode came into being, and we were all probably a bit fearful of this barcode. What was this new thing that we were using? Well, now it's just a few strips on a label, isn't it? And I think RFID is going to be the same sort of thing. There are a lot of people look at it and sort of say, well, that's an old technology, but all it is a little tiny circuit chip that can be embedded on any product. And the moment that's in there, you no longer need people checking stock in or even processing stock through tills at the other end.
But Uniqlo use it, don't they? I think Uniqlo, you put all of your clothes, I'm nodding over here, all the clothes into a receptacle, and it checks you out, and it's almost weird to go, hang on, I haven't done anything, I haven't scanned anything. How have I checked? How did you know I did that? I just put it in a hollow.
That's right. They're using it. Decathlon, they're using it. There are several of the Next, I know, are trialing it in some number of their stores. Quite a few of the fashion brands are, because of course they're getting all their product produced generally in one or two factories, and they're embedding that chip inside it. And you're right, all you have to do at the moment is go along, put this in a sort of bucket, and it just reads it automatically. Well, before that, there are other processes that happen as well. When that stock comes in on a pallet, in a roll cage, whatever it might be in its boxes, the back door of the unit has sensors around it, and it picks up every element of that stock and automatically books it on. You don't have to open it, scan it, book it in. It's just automatically put onto your stock system. If at any time you want to do a stock take of that product, you don't have to do the thing that we all do nowadays, which is go around and scan everything and take hours doing it. I've actually seen somebody do a stock take where they take something like a handheld device with an aerial on it. They walk all the way around the perimeter of the store, come back and plug it in and say their stock take done. So they actually can keep their stock live as well. And then, of course, when it leaves the business, at the moment, as you say, they're going in buckets and things. There are some of the big tech firms that are looking at other forms of technology where you just walk through a barrier and it automatically reads it. There are a lot of people compare it to the Amazon store. That's not quite right, because Amazon were using cameras to pick things up and moving from shelves. This is actually a bit more advanced than that. You can walk through a set of screens, and whatever is in your basket or your trolley will be picked up by the scanners that are there, and those scanners can automatically charge whatever payment where you have in your pocket. So you don't even need to take that out if you've got that registered with the store. Or they have a screen at the beginning where you touch your card, walk through it, just automatically charges it.
So shoplifting's done as well, therefore.
Yeah, all done, isn't it? Go with it hidden behind your coat. You can't do it anymore because you'd walk through, bleep and all of that. So yeah, good security system as well.
What's really interesting, I think, in that scenario, and I know that when anyone talks about technology, there's this fear element, and then there's the Luddites that worry that it's going to replace all the humans and you won't have the human interaction. I think it's refreshing to hear that if we can save the mundane human tasks over here, to then repurpose that person to have the interaction piece, particularly in a garden centre where, to your point, it's a social interaction. There's a hell of a lot of knowledge to impart when it comes particularly on plants. What can I grow here? What's going to fit this shade? What's going to fit that soil type? Which fertilizer, compost needs to go with that? You need the expertise. So I think it's nice to hear that, by the sounds of things, you're prioritizing still the people. They're just not doing that, but that doesn't mean there won't be any people. We'll repurpose them over here.
Absolutely, 100%. And you repurpose those people back into those customer facing roles. They give advice, but as they're giving advice, they inevitably increase your sales, because they're making sure the customer does go away with everything they need and don't miss half of that product. So you could call it service, but actually overall it's increasing your sales as well. Like I say, I can see that coming in the near future, and the barcode ultimately being replaced by the RFID tag.
Fantastic. Sounds good.